Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Legal Ease. Finally, we are here with you, trying and desperately trying to analyze and debunk and discuss SONA 2015, the State of the Nation of Dress. You're watching a special edition of Legal Ease, the show that usually converts legal jargon into legal ease. And tonight we have 4 or maybe even 5 experts who are going to assist us, and we are going to convert SONA into an easy to understand version of what it means to the man in the street and to the South African citizen. So without further ado, thank you very much for being patient. Thank you very much for staying with us. Let me introduce you to the panel of guests that we have for tonight's show. To my left, we have Mr. Letlapa Mpahlele. He is the president of the Pan-African Congress of Azania. To his left, we have Mr. Glenn Mpani. He is an expert, a political expert, and he is with OSISA, which is the Open Society Institute for Southern Africa. In our Cape Town panel, we have 2 very esteemed brothers. We have Mr. Farid Sayed, who is the editor for Muslim Views, and we have Sheikh Sadullah Khan, who is the CEO of Islamia College. I introduce them to you this evening, and they are going to be assisting me and you in understanding what is SONA, what happened leading up to SONA, and where to from here. Assalamu alaikum, good evening, brothers and guests, esteemed guests, and good evening to everybody at home.
Good evening, it's good to be on your program.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, it's my pleasure to be on your program.
Good evening.
Brother Farid Saeed and Mr. and Sheikh Khan, you guys are in Cape Town. You can hear us quite okay, inshallah?
Yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant. All right, let's get off. We were supposed to start the show at 8:30, which is the scheduled time for Legal Ease. A lot happened before that. The president was supposed to start his speech at 7 o'clock. That didn't take off very easily. We're now here, though. It is now essentially just after 9:30, and we are going to continue for a full hour. We're not going to take anything away from you guys at home, but inshallah, we will put in as much as possible. Unfortunately, we will not be taking any interaction from the viewers this evening. The guests have a lot to say, a lot to discuss. So let's get off with it immediately, starting from my left, Mr. Letlapa Mpahlele. If you can just indicate to us very briefly an introduction of yourself, the organization you're from, and how you'll be assisting us this evening.
I am Letlapa Mpahlele, president of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. Well, as a matter of fact, currently the PAC is de facto outlawed organization because we cannot stand in any election. The IEC has withdrawn its recognition of the organization. Now, at first, of course, we thought that they were joking, because on the eve of the registration for national elections last year, when we went to the IEC office, we were told that they no longer recognize the leadership which was elected at the last Congress in Butterworth, Eastern Cape, where I was elected as president, the organization's president. And not only elected, but elected by an overwhelming majority. I think it was 5-1 to the guy who was contesting the position of the presidency. But now, of course, we went to court and we won the case. But because of the technicality that if there is an appeal, the status quo remains, so it remained. But 2 months ago, we were told that none of the factions in the PAC is being recognized. Therefore, we cannot contest any by-election. As you know that in every country, in every month, we have by-elections in this country, yes. Local government elections. Yes. Hence, I'm saying the PAC is de facto an outlawed organization.
And that will be very interesting for us to hear the opinion of Mr. Mpahlele on what occurred this evening and essentially what is the status of South African government. Mr. Mpani, or CISA, talk to us about that and what it is that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you so much. The Open Society Institute Southern Africa is a grant-making institution. It's one of over 60 foundations that is global. It's a foundation that is a philanthropic arm of billionaire George Soros. Okay. Our work involves supporting organizations that work in trying to build democracy. We're a grant-making institution that works in a number of areas, promoting the rights of the marginalized, working in terms of strengthening state institutions and non-state institutions, working with civil society. So we work more broadly our agenda being to ensure that we improve the quality of democracy. And for Open Society Southern Africa, we work in Southern Africa, and I work in the Democracy and Governance Program.
Democracy and governance, two very, very relevant topics for tonight's show. Again, as well as to what happened in Sona this evening. Over to our guests in studio in Cape Town, Brother Farid Sayed and Sheikh Sadullah Khan. Brother Farid, your background and a bit of an introduction from your side.
Yeah, I'm currently the editor of Muslim Views, a newspaper that has a kind of collective history that stretches to over 50 years. Having been founded in 1960 as Muslim News, and then during the state of emergency in 1986, the paper was shut down and we relaunched as Muslim Views. It is a newspaper that follows the Islamic ethos, commenting on issues both local and international. And our particular interest, of course, in Sona today and the interaction with our guests, looking at what happened preceding the President's speech, but also was there anything of real substance, and this is what we hope to analyze this evening.
Very, very important, Brother Farid, from a media perspective. I mean, right off the bat at Sona, we were told you won't get any cell phone signal, you won't get any reception, nothing's going to go out of here. We've put a blocker on, and there was an uprising, there was an uproar, and that's essentially what kicked off, and that's how Sona kicked off. So interesting to hear your comments, inshallah, soon on that. Sheikh Sadullah Khan is CEO of Islamia College.
That's correct. My name is Sadullah Khan. I'm the CEO of Islamia College, which is the largest Islamic school in the Southern Hemisphere. I've also come from a background that's involved with the Muslim Views as editor in the past. And we come from a Black Conscious Movement background. And of course, you were referring to the opening of Sona. It was a reflection of the state of the nation in some ways, or at least the reflection of the leadership of the nation. And rather chaotic, embarrassing in some way, and it set the tone for some mediocre speech, I think.
Brothers and guests, already, from the beginning, media was talking about what the EFF had done to pretty much almost steal the show. Already from the offset, we weren't talking about 25 years since the release of President Nelson Mandela, or 25 years of the glory years, as they call it, of the ANC. We weren't talking about that. We were talking about the potential disruption. We were talking about security blitz. Did Malema and the EFF, let's just hit this, let's just deal with this, the elephant in the room. Did Malema achieve what he set out to achieve? In creating that buzz, and then essentially getting kicked out of Parliament?
My view is that he achieved what he intended to do, which he originally, they have been talking about ever since the last incident in Parliament where the President, his speech was aborted because of similar incident that took place. And so what happened today was more or less in fulfillment of what they have been promising. But I think it's important to look at this within a context. I think we have got two issues here that are at the table. One, we have got an issue of accountability on the part of the executive.
Okay.
No matter what the issues are, I think there's a responsibility on the part of the executive to play a role in terms of ensuring that they are accountable to Parliament. And in any event, when an executive gets an opportunity where they are no longer responding to issues that Parliament is raising, we have a challenge. The second one that we currently have is the issue to say we have a matter that is on the table, the issue of addressing the issues that came out of the Nkandla report.
Okay.
This has more or less created a stalemate in terms of the business of Parliament. One would want to ask themselves to say, should we continue on this matter longer? What else is suffering as we are caught up in the stalemate? Are there no other mechanisms of addressing this problem? And I think this is something that people need to collectively look at, to say, how do we deal with this? The third issue that one needs to look at is to say, for the EFF, this is a very good platform for them to gain more political mileage. We've got local government elections that are coming in 2016. This keeps them on the radar. This keeps them on the agenda. So in essence, this plays to their advantage in terms of ensuring that they remain on the platform.
One of those, even bad publicity is good publicity.
Good publicity. So no matter how we describe, you see, there's always a debate where people simply say, no, this is not proper decorum, this is not how you debate. But you should also ask yourself, who is the constituents for the EFF? Who are the people who listen to them, who understand what they are doing? So in essence, I would, if I was in the position of the executive and the ANC, I think this issue of Nkandla, they need to be able to respond to it. The answer might not be satisfactory. The answer might not be in the interest, but an answer is required that addresses this challenge.
Let's just quickly cut to Cape Town. Brother Farid, these important question which I want to ask you, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Mpahlela for his views as a political party leader. From a media perspective now, Rule 14 was cited of the Parliament rule saying you are not allowed, this is a joint sitting of Parliament, National Council of Provinces and National Assembly, you are not allowed to have it shut off from the rest of the world. Your comment on that from a media perspective?
Yeah. In fact, as the chief whip of the DA pointed out, that constitutionally it was definitely not allowed, cutting off the signals. And I think the speaker, I don't think she was caught off guard. I don't think she was unaware of the fact that there was no cell phone signal. But I think she didn't expect it to be raised so forcefully. And on that score, I think she did the right thing. She passed it on to the Secretary of Parliament. But as someone described it, she tried to kick it out of touch. But it didn't work. They persisted. And I think it was an important victory for access to Parliament. After all, the State of the Nation address during the time of President Thabo Mbeki and President Nelson Mandela was at around about 11 in the morning. By the time people came home from work, they really missed it. So the whole point of having SONA at 7 o'clock was to give access to the people, and then you shut it off by blocking off cell phone signals. Just another factor from the media point of view, I heard that News 24 had actually handed over a letter to the Secretary of Parliament demanding an explanation why the cell phone signal was cut off. So I don't think they would have got away with it. Perhaps they thought maybe they may, no one would notice. But it's really, I think it was quite ridiculous, even attempting something like that. But coming back to the point, and if I can just pick up on something that Mr. Mpani said about the EFF, I think and also taking what Mr. Mpahlela said about the current state of the PAC. When the EFF was established, I think people looked at a credible left organization, an organization to the left of the ANC, someone that would challenge the neoliberal policies of the ANC. And I think what has turned out really is a bit of a disappointment. The EFF is good at the theatrics. As it was pointed out, they may have achieved something in terms of publicity, but what is the essence? And I think it is really a sad reflection of current politics that the PAC is in fact, as its leader is saying, a banned party, a party that's not allowed to operate, because we need a credible and a powerful opposition to the left of the ANC, because this is what we really need in order to address the issues of social injustice, Nadeem.
Brother Farid, excellent comment. Mr. Mpahlela, you've heard what Brother Farid has said. Sitting outside, on the outside now, still a political party in your own mind and in your own right, and you've confirmed that fair elections had passed and you were essentially the rightfully elected president. Sitting on the outside, what are you saying? What are you seeing when you're looking on the inside and saying these political parties have a platform, they can do something? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? What would you say they can do better?
Yeah, let me start off by commenting on tonight's events. On the surface, what EFF has done today is an anarchy. But remember that anarchy is like violence. A poor man's violence is called terrorism, but a rich man's violence is called a law and order. Now, if you look at EFF, they are reacting to something. And the ruling party is always invoking, rules, rule this, rule that, rule this, rule that. But to me, it does not make sense because the person who has been violating the rules is the president himself. For instance, in the fourth parliament, at one point, he failed to declare his interests. And it was for the first time that the head of state failed to declare his interests. And of course, later on, his interests were declared belatedly. And again, he appointed the former judge president, Sandile Ngobo, irregularly, until it was brought to his attention that he should have consulted leaders of the opposition before he did that. Now, more than half of ANC members of parliament were late in submitting their interest. I don't want to talk about travel gate scandal and many other scandals that have not been exposed to the public. Now, when the EFF is doing that, of course, they do get some publicity, a bonus. But the fact of the matter is that it's just a symptom of something that is going fundamentally wrong. And that something is official anarchy. I was listening to the president talking about corruption and the fight against corruption, and that 31 civil servants have been arrested. Those for me are just laughable statistics because we know who is corrupt. For the fact that every SONA, he's talking about corruption. At some point, he talked about a presidential hotline where the public should actually call him and report corruption. And I was still in the fourth parliament, as a member of parliament. I attended the launch of that. And actually, when we interacted with the people who received the calls, they say the callers, after they had reported to the president, they got threatening calls, which means even that hotline to the president was corrupt itself. And he never again speaks about it at any SONA because actually people who were reporting corruption were not protected. So I think if we are serious, we should be democratic in the real sense of the word. But I mean, the whole thing for me, it does not make a lot of sense where people run, corruption schemes. And he said civil servants are not allowed to make business with the government. Well, that is welcome and commendable. But what about Chancellor House, which is an investment arm of the ruling party?
Sheikh Saidullah, you've heard from our inside man, the gentleman who was there. He was part of it. He was involved in the thick of it. You've heard from him. At the outset, you made comments that what we saw was disgusting, embarrassing to the outside world. Having heard what Mr. Mphahlele has said, and having said what you said at the outset, and then looking at how President Jacob Zuma, and this is now potentially a personal opinion, gentlemen, but looking at how Mr. Zuma handled the situation when he came back in. He was charismatic, he was humorous, he was laughing at some stage, he was relatively cheerful. He appeared to laugh it off, almost as a president would. So to say that, well, it happened, we're not going to give it much light, we're not going to give it much attention. Your comments on that, Sheikh?
Yeah, I said that the presentation was mediocre, not disgusting, but mediocre, I said. And I think just laughing off at things, the state of the nation is not in a good state. And this is very important to understand. What I think was, I was not impressed with the way he handled it. He just skirted the issue. I think he tends to laugh at everything. And I didn't find it funny, first of all. I think we have serious issues. We are a nation that emerged from a struggle, from a noble struggle. People like Robert Sobukwe and Nelson Mandela and Luthuli and Imam Haroon, people gave their lives. We are emerging from a struggle. We're not just like any other country that is a democratic country. We fought very hard. We paid with blood. We lost many sons and daughters. We have many martyrs. So we emerged from struggle. And when you give a State of the Nation, it's how far have you come in that struggle. It's a long walk to freedom, which is a long way to go still. But how far have you come in that walk? How many of those who are supposed to represent us are still walking the walk and not only talking the talk? And I think this is the issue. The State of the Nation was more a forecast of what they're going to do. It's not supposed to be a forecast. It's supposed to be retrospective of what is being done, what has been done. There was nothing much to cheer for. And I was very disappointed in that, because your hopes and aspiration lies in what the leader who's supposed to be elected by the majority of the people presents, what we have done, what we are doing, and what we are going to do. And a few of the points, for example, are we achieving the objective of the struggle? And then also, there are issues, jobs, unemployment, housing, health, education, water, sanitation, corruption. We find all of these were not addressed at all in detail, or just passing remarks and what is going to be done. So the State of the Nation is in a bad state. From the words of, from what I've heard from Jacob Zuma, he had nothing much to say, I think. And that for me is disappointing. And when the world is watching what they are watching, it's a bad reflection of a country that has produced so many great people. That has in the history people like Mahatma Gandhi and Mandela and Sobukwe and Safanya Motopeng and people like that.
Sheikh.
This is where we are after 25 years, over 20 years of democracy. We are not in a good state, and I'm concerned about that.
Sheikh,
and the president reflected that.
Saying that what you said,
it's a presentation of that,
let me just
somewhat
ask
of a
this
failure in a way of where we have gone off the track.
Okay. Let me just ask this question very quickly, Sheikh, if I can put you on hold. Mr. Mpani, Sheikh Sadullah is talking about the sons of the struggle. Jacob Zuma was a son of the struggle. He was heavily involved in the MK. He was heavily involved in the developmental years of the ANC. Would you concur with what the Sheikh has said in respect of the state of the nation, in respect of how he handled the situation, and how he handles, or is that a reflection of how he handles the situations in general within our state?
In fact, I concur with him. The state of the nation was reflected in what transpired in Parliament. That's how the nation is right now. You have a nation where all is not well. The state is not properly coordinated. There are high levels of corruption. The levels of inequalities are very high. We have got a challenge in terms of dealing with energy and electricity. Crime is at its highest level. So there are a number of challenges. And one anticipates that when a country is going through such challenges, you need a leadership that is able to grapple with the challenges. It's very important for us to understand that there is nothing wrong in disagreements or contestation of ideas, but you need to show leadership in management of that conflict. And whenever President Zuma was laughing it off, there comes a time where one questions to say, does he appreciate the levels of challenges that this country is going through? Does he have an understanding that there is a deeper crisis within the country? And there are a number of issues that we can talk about. I think we raised the issue of corruption. In all intents and purposes, the principle for him to pay back the money does not mean that he is the most corrupt or the most corrupt person within the country. We've got massive levels of corruption that are taking place in the private sector. We've got massive levels of corruption that are taking place in terms of undervalued resources. We've got massive levels of corruption where resources are going out and they are undervalued. But the principle is that you need a leadership that is able to take charge and ensure that they can take stewardship on resources. So that in itself, that confidence that is needed, is what we are failing to see. And that is what is worrisome to say in the next 2 to 3 years. Will we get that from the ANC? What are we likely to get from that leadership? I think that's where the challenge is right now.
Brother Farid, and Mr. Mpahlele, from an outside and an inside perspective, when Mr. Zuma talks about the figures, he talks billions, he talks in billions of rands. He talks in billions of rands of export and revenue and increase in growth. From an outside point of view, from a media point of view, Brother Farid, how does that portray to the outside world? And Mr. Mpahlele, from an inside perspective, do we sit here and can we see through it, or is that the realistic impression? So, Brother Farid, if you can give us first, and then Mr. Mpahlele after that.
Yeah, you know, when one looks at, I also concur with what Sheikh Saadullah and Mr. Pan said, that the manner of, the manner in which he sort of handled the crisis, the immediate crisis, and also the long-term crisis that the country is facing. Now, quoting figures may sound impressive, but I think the responsibility lies on the media. And I'll just give you an example, that when the president makes a statement, when he says they are going to be creating 1 million jobs or whatever, or when he talks about beneficiation in the mineral industry, we don't, as media generally, and I'm speaking as a collective here, we don't follow up and say, be accountable for what you have said. You know, going 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, or even a year later, what have you got to show for what you have done? Now, this was the 8th State of the Nation address by President Jacob Zuma. And every State of the Nation address has kind of a refrain, you know, we have a good story to tell.
Yes.
This, earlier today, he spoke, for example, about agriculture. And we know in the Western Cape, which is perhaps the fruit basket of the country, fruit basket probably of the continent, the agricultural industry is in a dire strait. The workers are underpaid. We had huge strikes. And yet we find the president able to say that you know, this is a good story. He quoted figures, something like 500 million rands in terms of revenue that is received by exporting apples, for example. Yes. But having said all of that, what is the reality on the ground? And we know the reality on the ground, as far as land redistribution is concerned, we heard again figures, you know, we heard about promises being made, but we have heard these promises being made in the past, and nothing has been delivered. So I think, you know, you asked the question, Nadeem, about how is it perceived by the outside world. Yes. I think seasoned observers will see the speech for what it is, rhetoric, and just trying to appease the electorate by saying, you know, the cliche that he uses, we have a good story to tell.
Mr. Mpahlele, do you concur with Mr. Farid in Cape Town? I mean, you're an inside man, and I keep referring to that, and I'm going to harp on that if you don't mind. But you know, it's important because we haven't been there. And Mr. Farid gives very, very good commentary on how the world views it, and he concurs with Mr. Mpani and Sheikh Saadullah. Your view on that issue?
Absolutely, I do concur. Because the reality on the ground, when you juxtapose it with his mind-boggling figures, billions of rands on this, billions of rand on this, the two really don't support each other. For instance, the president talked about 1 million job opportunities per year that is being created. Now, there's a difference between a job and a job opportunity. That's what he said, I mean, in one of his State of the Nation address. Now, a job of opportunity is someone, you know, waving a flag for the traffic, you know, to stop during the road construction. And if that road construction takes 3 months, that job opportunity is going to last just for 3 months, and then it will be over. So, and of course, the reality on the ground really it does not tally with that what the president is promising. Oxfam, a very reputable NGO, has established that indigenous Africans or blacks in this country are poorer today than they were at the end of apartheid. And this is a fact. Now, you ask yourself what the government is doing.
But is that not because, I mean, times have just changed? Things have become more expensive. There's a lot more people in the country. Population has increased. Is that...
No,
Is
no,
that a
no,
factor?
no. Well, population in China is increasing, I think, 1,000 times more than ours, and of course, actually, Chinese have pulled out a few 100 million people out of poverty. So it has got nothing to do with population. It's just like, you know, a lack of rain does not necessarily cause hunger. What causes hunger is the policies that government, you know, is pushing. But now, another sad reality in this country is that, you know, there are people who go to bed without eating. I remember in Hluhluwe, in KwaZulu-Natal, where people actually were eating cow dung so that they can drink their ARVs. Now, it tells you how deep the level of poverty has gone in this country. Lastly, in his opening lines, the president talked about the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Charter. Well, he's son of a liberation struggle. And in his concluding remarks, he's talking about the reburial of Moses Kotana,
Yes.
and J.P. Marx from Moscow to South Africa.
Yes.
Now, the public can ask, the ANC did not struggle alone. For instance, out of 134 people who were executed for political reasons in Pretoria Central, 94 were PAC members. But none of them have been reburied. I don't talk about PAC leaders like Chairman Nyati Pukela, who died in exile. And in this country, MK veterans have been honored 3 times. And I've attended 2 of the 3 honoring events. And the APLA veterans, not once. So even though the partisan approach that the president has, it's not about liberation movement, it's simply about the ruling party.
Well, we've heard from Mr. Mphahlele. He's, as you can hear, and very insightful because from a man on the inside, as I've mentioned not once but more than twice, in fact, very insightful and something that we can really sit and dwell on, Mr. Mpani and our brothers in Cape Town. We're going to take a short ad break and we're going to then change the segment. Brother Farid and Sheikh Sadullah, we're going to change the segment. We're going to have another guest, or we're going to say goodbye to Mr. Mphahlele, and we're going to then replace him with another Muslim leader, a gentleman by the name of Maulana Abbas Mkize, and then we're going to take the conversation from there. So let me say just thank you very much, Mr. Mphahlele. You've been extremely helpful, and we really hope to have you on the show again, possibly for the next year, Sona. Hopefully before then, maybe even for the elections that come up, and maybe by the next
budget speech.
But maybe by next time you guys will be unbanned.
Back in Parliament.
Yeah. Back in Parliament. So we say thank you very much to Mr. Mphahlele, and we will be back shortly with our new guest, and we'll continue with our guests in Cape Town as well as Mr. Mpani. Jazakallah for staying tuned. Stay with us. This is Legal Ease. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the special edition of Legal Ease Sona 2015. Before the break, we were talking to Mr. Letlapa Mphahlele with Mr. Mpani, Brother Farid Sayed from Cape Town, as well as Sheikh Sadullah. We now have been joined by Maulana Abbas Mkize. He's an Islamic community leader in Johannesburg, in Johannesburg, and he will be talking to us about the grassroots level perspective of what we've seen this evening on Sona and what we can expect in conjunction with the expert from Osisa, as well as Sheikh Sadullah, as well as Brother Farid in Cape Town. Let's turn now and introduce and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Maulana Abbas.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and all the listeners.
Maulana, just very quickly, give us an introduction of you. What is it that you do on a day-to-day basis, and a little bit about your background. You've been watching the show from the outside, and you've been listening to the comments of Brother Farid, Sheikh Sadullah, Mr. Mphahlele, and Mr. Mpani. You have an understanding of what we are going to expect coming forward after Sona. So life after Sona, so to speak. Just quickly, a background on yourself.
Well, I'm from Soweto and a member of Soweto Muslim Shura.
Okay, and Madam Abbas, from a political perspective, we all know communities are very important. Mr. Mpadi, I'm sure you'll agree with me. Sheikh Sadella, I'm sure you'll agree with me. Communities are very important. These are the people in the street, the people who don't understand numbers and figures and billions and millions. What are the people looking to hear from the State of the Nation address?
Well, in my personal view, the State of the Nation address today was extremely disappointing in the sense that it has instilled very little hope in many South Africans that are faced with practical circumstances of poverty. And the president has quoted over 13,000 worth of protests that have taken place so far, which is a clear indication that the country is dissatisfied with the service delivery. Well, over and above everything else which the president has said in his promises that he made, people on the ground are seeing little or perhaps even nothing practically translated into their circumstances. And I think this will add to the pressure that the country is already feeling on the ground.
Sheikh Sadallah, from your perspective, also a community man, in your sense, the Islamia College, Brother Maulana Abbas is from Soweto. You are from Western Cape. Is the mindset the same from the community in the Western Cape?
Issues, and as Maulana mentioned so correctly, you see, very often, as Ahmad bin Bella said, he said, you know, the success of a revolution, or the revolution itself, the success is measured by how you meet the needs of the people who revolted. In other words, have you met the needs, or are you servicing the needs or meeting the needs of those who have been downtrodden and those who rose up? And now this is one part. Second part is to ensure that those who come to power don't become like those who were before them. Corruption should not be there at all. And here we know there's systemic corruption in our leadership. So what we needed to know, for example, is corruption from the man who spoke himself. Corruption around him. So the point here is, as a leader who leads the nation, the issues of corruption, what are you doing to stem the tide of corruption? Corruption at the highest level and then throughout. We have the right to safety and security, but also the right to peace. The crime is spiraling out of control. People are more unsafe here than in many parts of the world. Inequality, the people who are impoverished are somewhat worse off now than they were before. Now all of these are real issues. It's not only a political address, it's addressing the needs of a nation that went through a tremendous struggle, a struggle which the world looked up to and admired. The question I would ask is, what would Steve Biko say if he was here today? What would Robert Sobukwe say if he was here today? These are the things. What would they say? What would Imam Abdullah Harun say if he was here today? Ahmad Timol, what would they say if they saw what they died for and what they fought for? Is this where they would have seen the country? And I think no. And I think this is what it is. And people at the bottom level, some of them were born after the struggle, but are they bearing the fruits? Are they witnessing the fruits? You know, is there job creation? Is there safety? Is there security? Is there water, sanitation, home, jobs, food, education? How accessible is this to the people? If we haven't done that, then we haven't met the needs of the people, and that needs to be addressed. Absolutely. And once you have an address of that nature, then you're addressing the nation, addressing the issues of the nation, and the state of the nation will be a retrospective reflection of what was done in the past for that year, for that nation. That is not happening. And therefore, as Maulana said, I'm sure people are disappointed.
Yeah. Brother Farid, I mean, we've heard from Mr. Mbani, and we've heard from Mr. Mhlele and Maulana Abbas now, and also Sheikh Sadallah. Is there something good that you can take out of SONA 2050? Is there anything that you can say? And I personally say the fact that he touched on the energy crisis, he touched on the water shortage, and the potential problem with water, and the projects that they put in place. Could you say that that was good? Was there anything good from your perspective that came out of what he said?
Well, I think generally the main criticism of the speech has been that it was uninspiring. It didn't instill a sense of confidence that the president and the executive, because remember the president represents the kind of collective which is the executive, the cabinet. SONA just doesn't happen. The president doesn't go into some corner and say, look, I'm going to be now delivering the speech and these are my ideas. These are ideas that came from the NEC. There was the Lakhotla of the NEC. They discussed it. Then they've discussed it in the cabinet. The executive sat down with the various premiers of the provinces, and then the president comes forward. So, and to me, that actually indicates a bigger crisis. Because if it was just one person, if it was President Jacob Zuma, and there's a lot of personal kind of focus on him. And I think perhaps we make a mistake, because we say, you know what, if we had another president, things would change. I think we're looking at a much more serious issue, because what we saw today, what we heard today, came from SONA. Rather came from the executive. Now, to your question, whether there was anything positive to take out, I think what has come out of SONA are the markers. And I think I look at the 9 markers that the president mentioned, and number 1, right on top, was energy and how to deal with the energy crisis. And he spent a lot of time in the speech as far as that was concerned. So one is not simply dismissing and saying, look, the president didn't recognize the challenges. But I think the issue here is what message has he given the electorate? What message has he given to the citizens of this country that we, as the government of the day, are capable, and are not only capable, but we have the political will to actually address the issue. Because bear in mind, SONA is very much about public perception. It is a public event. As I said earlier, it was shifted from 11 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. at night. So the president really needs to give a message that inspires people. It doesn't have to be smart oratory or anything of that sort. So that is the one point. But I think one needs to look at the substance that came out of it. And to me, the important things that came out, and I'm not saying these were good stories, but I think the 9 markers that the president referred to, one being the energy crisis, the other was on agriculture, job creation, etc. But now again, also in job creation, earlier Mr. Mpashlele spoke about job opportunities. And the president again used the word job opportunities. We don't need job opportunities, we need real jobs.
Actual jobs.
What I think was not addressed, and I'm sorry to sound negative, you know, you've asked me to look at the good side of things. But I think maybe what we should be looking at is, in terms of the negative that came out, there was not enough emphasis on how this economy is going to grow.
Aspects.
He opened his speech by saying that there are dire predictions internationally. We're not going to reach our targets as far as growth is concerned. But in his speech, he just touched on small businesses, SMEs, etc. But he did not really give us anything substantial, anything tangible to say, this is how the economy is going to grow.
But Mr. Mpani, let me ask you very quickly. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. Cape Town, if you can hear us as well, we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. We were cut down substantially. But very quickly, going forward now, what does the ruling party, and Mulana Abbas, the same with you, what does the ruling party have to focus on as a critical issue? That one thing that can really change the perception of experts like yourselves and the man in the street, Mulana Abbas and Mr. Mpani?
I think it's important, one, to address the political framework. One, we have to ensure that Parliament works again.
Okay.
So one, there is need to address the issues that are on the table to ensure that it can be functional again. The second issue that one needs to deal with is on the 9 markers that you put on the table. How is the ANC going to flesh them out? What is going to be the operational framework? Is it possible for them to be able to implement that? He also touched on the issue of agriculture, the issue of land ownership. It's a very important issue. he realizes that the issue of willing buyer, willing seller is now is a challenge.
Yes.
How are you going to grapple with it? Is it not going to affect investments? But I think what would be top on the agenda for me is improving the livelihoods of the masses of South Africa, addressing issues of electricity, water, and service delivery.
Very, very quickly, let me just stop you there and just ask Mulana Abbas very, very quickly. Agriculture, land, fundamental. Just give me your thoughts on the importance of that very, very quickly before we close off as a final comment.
Well, I cannot do it in half a minute, but of the 5 million people that own land for agricultural purposes, I think only 60,000, they account for 80% of the land. That alone tells you that we're in a very serious predicament, and as long as the government is not willing to reconcile apartheid, which I think is an exercise that was never undertaken, and the replacement of the Freedom Charter for the beneficiation of the minority big so-called companies which were not even part of the speech. So whatever the case is, there's a lot of frustrations that for years when you keep on hearing promises and on the ground a person who has absolutely not even a loaf of bread to eat, I think it brings a lot of sense of frustration which could lead to undesired
unrest. Brother Farid, Sheikh Sadullah, very quickly, your final comments on the issues, very, very quickly before we close off the show and say Assalamu alaikum to yourselves.
I think my final comment, and very quickly, again, we need to hold the president accountable on those 9 points, as Mr. Pani said. As journalists, as media, that is our task. I think we need to be persistent and say that these 9 goals are supposed to improve the lives of ordinary people and track exactly how far they are making progress as far as those 9 points are concerned.
Jazakallah. Sheikh Sadullah.
With Brother Farid, the idea is to fulfill the aims and objectives of the struggle and to make sure that the community, the country itself is each year in a better state and that the most oppressed and the most needy are addressed the most and their issues are top of the agenda and reaches the highest priority. Thank you.
Brothers in Cape Town, Jazakumullah khairun. You have been phenomenal. Thank you very much for your very insightful and very informative and educational comments on SONA 2015. We bid you farewell on your side while we wrap up on our side in Johannesburg. Mulana Abbas, Mr. Mpani, you've as well been extremely insightful. The perspectives that we've received from yourselves, both from a social development, governance point of view, as well as from the grassroots man, the community man, the man in the street who is looking to his people, who are looking to him for leadership. Jazakumullah khairan to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mpani. This has been a special edition of Legal Ease, SONA 2015. We hope that we have educated you. We hope that we have given you the insights that you require to understand what the State of the Nation address is and what it should be. And we look forward to celebrating again with you, potentially the budget speech. Mr. Mpani and Mr. Mulana Abbas will probably join us again, hopefully, and we'll discuss that further, inshallah, in good time. But for now, this has been Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Jazakumullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and Jummah Mubarak.